Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today. We're going with the next session will be in English, and we'll have our guest is Mr. Kostas Charalampopoulos. He's a senior engineer from THALES. THALES is one of the greatest company that operates in a lot of sectors, in aviation, in security, with more than 80,000 employees all over the world. And Kostas prepared for us a topic, a very interesting one, related with digital transformation, but obviously with a flavor of cybersecurity, digital transformation in a zero trust world. Kostas, thank you very much for being with us today.
Hi, thank you, Hugo. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and congratulations for this amazing event. Hello, everyone. Actually, in this session today, we're going to discuss about digital transformation, but mainly how we can secure digital transformation initiatives in a zero trust world.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So let's start from the basics and see some definitions. Actually, digital transformation is the integration of digital technology in several areas of the business with the main objective to bring more value to our end customers. So that is always the target, to bring more and more value with effective and flexible services. According to the latest reports, digital transformation technologies use cloud, big data, Internet of Things, container, mobile service, and blockchain. Also, according to the latest THALES data threat report, about 97% of modern organizations are using one or more digital transformation technologies, and another 97% of companies are using sensitive data within this digital transformation strategy. So it's really obvious and quite important to say that the two core components of digital transformation is cutting-edge technology along with sensitive data. According to the latest data threat report of THALES, about 43% of organizations are using at least two platform as a service providers, along with another 28% of companies that are using more than 50 software as a service application, and another 48% that is using around at least two infrastructure as a service providers. So it's really obvious that multi-cloud is the key in the digital transformation strategy. We all know that cloud, and especially multi-cloud, is really efficient and can really boost the secure digital transformation strategy. But what about risk? We have seen that we have a lot of sensitive data shared across several cloud environments. So this situation can lead to less and less control and higher risk. Indeed, and unfortunately, I would say the risk is real. According to our reports, the two main causes of cyber threat are identity theft and unencrypted data. So more than 69% of the breaches came from identity theft, and 95% of the data that was leaked involved unencrypted data. So it seems that it's quite easy and trivial for the attacker to steal the data and then impersonate legit users by performing identity theft attacks. Indeed, the attacks are real. Within the last couple of years, we have seen a lot identity theft related attacks with a lot of data leakages. So it seems that we need somehow, first of all, to identify the cause of the identity theft related attacks and then try to mitigate the risk. Actually, so the question is, what is the root cause? What we can do? First of all, the perimeter security is not sufficient anymore. Traditionally, we used to have the corporate resources. Across the corporate resources, we had some perimeter and network controls, and that's it. It used to be sufficient a few years ago. Unfortunately, it's not valid and sufficient anymore. Now we have a lot of users traveling, working from home, working from unknown or untrusted networks, and these users are actually officially bypassing the perimeter security and the network controls. Also, the login page is now completely exposed, especially in cloud and web applications, so malicious users can easily find out the front door and perform several attempts to penetrate. The only barrier there is usually a password that is often shared and reused. so we end up to a lack of visibility. So it's really hard for IT, operation or security teams to find out who has access, which application, when, and how. So the problem is here. We need to find out an effective way to mitigate the risk and really decrease the data leakage and the identity theft attacks. This is where zero trust comes into game. Actually, the fundamental principle here is that all transactions are untrusted by default. It sounds like the deny all rule. So any transaction, any access attempt is automatically denied, and we need to evaluate who is trying to access the protected resource and which resource is trying to access. So based on these two factors, we assess the risk, and then we allow the end user or the customer to access the protected resource. On top of that, the modern zero trust strategy should also take into account some other attributes, such as the location, the network, the device, some machine learning, and so on, in order to provide an accurate risk score and allow or block the user. These fundamental principles of zero trust are also validated by NIST, actually at the latest special publication of NIST that is focused on zero trust architecture. NIST recommends to never trust but always verify. According to NIST, enterprise network is not considered a trust zone anymore. Actually, I would say that there is no strict enterprise networks, with all the applications being in the cloud or in some hybrid cloud environments with so many users being across distributed in several locations. There is no real enterprise private network. Also, the devices may not be owned by the enterprise. It has been quite famous the last few years, the bring your own device movement. So more and more users are using their private laptops, private networks, private tablets or mobiles in order to access protected resources. And it's really hard to block this kind of movements because we all the time we need to offer, besides security, we do need to offer also a smooth user experience. And last but not least, according to NIST, there's no trusted resource. By default, everything is untrusted, and we need to validate in order to enter the trusted zone. According to the latest THALES Access Management report, zero trust adoption is really low. Actually, around 30% of organizations are having a formal zero trust strategy. Formal means that they have some controls, they have some documented policy, and so on. While another 49% is trying to establish or having a pilot zero trust strategy. So they are trying to, establish a new zero trust strategy. So it's more than obvious that zero trust strategy is the way, is the effective way to mitigate the risk, but yet it's not that established. The next and one common question that arises here is, what should be the objectives of an effective zero trust strategy? All right, we know that the risk is there. A zero trust strategy should be the way to deal with this kind of risk and attacks, but what should we do? Actually, an effective zero trust strategy, based on our experience, should be able to prevent breaches, also should be able to secure digital transformation. So it's quite important not to block the digital transformation initiations. Actually, I would say that cybersecurity and also the access management control should be able to boost the digital transformation. Actually, cybersecurity should be a business tool in order to provide more business value to the end customers. Last but not least, zero trust and effective zero trust strategy should be able to simplify compliance. More and more regulators are coming, local or international laws, internal or external auditors. So it's quite important for both IT and operators team to be able to prove compliance, to send a report to the auditor and to prove that the controls are in place. How can this be done? This is another common question that we get. All right, we know the objectives, but in reality, what kind of controls we need? What should we implement, both in a procedural way, but also in a technical way? How we can filter our authentication attempts? Usually, in order to achieve a zero trust strategy and have an effective strategy, first of all, you need to assess the risk. This is the place where you build up your maps. You identify the applications, the users, the groups, the access permission. That's one of the most important steps that usually gets skipped by organization, but it is really critical. That's the map. There is no way to go uphill without a map. So it's really important to assess the risk and find out the application, the systems, and so on. Once you have built up the map, so once you know your identity and access management landscape, you need to manage the risk. This is the core component. This is the step where we define the policies. That's the step where we say this user group is allowed to access this protected resource for unknown networks with username and password along with OTP. Or that's the place where we define a policy and say, all right, if a user is coming from an unsupported laptop with Windows XP or 7, don't block the user, just prompt the user for an additional authentication factor. So this is the core component of our access management policy. Last but not least, we need always to monitor the risk. There is no way to set it and forget it. We should all the time monitor the access management and identity activity in order to detect unusual security events and adjust the policy as needed. Let's go a bit deeper. Actually, another common question is what attributes we should take into account in order to mitigate the risk. Some common attributes that we recommend is the network. So we should be able to detect between trusted or untrusted networks. The operating system, we should detect supported or unsupported or operating systems that are not compliant with our policy. Known or unknown user device, domain joined device or non-domain joined device, as well as the location. It's quite important to be able to block some high-risk location or to detect the country change. So since most of the identity theft attacks use this kind of technology. At THALES, we have designed a product, a solution that is called Safety Trusted Access that is able, that provides the foundation of security, that is multi-factor authentication. On top of that, it does provide policy-based access. So it means that we do collect some attributes and context from the user identity. And based on that, we prompt the user for authentication, additional authentication factor. But we also had in mind, once the solution was designed, to be to offer the best user experience. That's why we do also offer smart single sign-on. By having the user experience in mind, the solution offers universal authentication. It's quite important, especially these days that the user are using several devices, several mobile devices, laptops, and so on. So using STA, we offer to our users the option to use software tokens, hardware tokens, pattern-based tokens, passwords, Kerberos, FIDO, and so on. So the idea is to provide the best security, but also offer an optimum user experience and flexibility. One key component, I would say, of secure digital transformation is flexibility. We should be able to offer agile and flexible service to our end users. The last year or a couple of years, there's a new movement that is called passwordless authentication. And I would say that it has been here and it will stay here for a long time, since with passwordless authentication, we can really eliminate the text-based passwords and deliver less friction and more security, but we can also offer the right level of security for the right application. Actually, I would say 5 or 6 years ago, it seemed like an ideal scenario, but unrealistic scenario to have an application that you will need just to approve a push notification, or that you are going to use one USB token and access the protected resource without the need to remember a password and PIN and so on. Currently, we offer 4 main ways for passwordless authentication using push OTP and biometric, PKI Based Authentication, as well as FIDO hardware devices. So it's quite smooth and easy to go passwordless and offer the best trade-off between security and usability. PKI-based authentication used to be quite famous 10 or more years ago, and it's really valid because it offers strong authentication, especially when the certificates are stored within the smart card. So it's quite easy. But the main drawback was that with certificates stored within a PKI smart card, there should be some kind of trust between the certification authority and the service. And it was not that easy. especially with cloud applications, with some web-based apps, and so on. That's why we started thinking about alternatives, and this is where FIDO came into the game. Actually, FIDO Alliance is an open industry that is focused on authentication standards. So the Alliance research and releases the standards, and several vendors implement by creating related products. Let's get back to the basics and see some information related to FIDO in order to familiarize ourselves. First of all, for FIDO compliant authentication, the user needs one USB token or smart card, FIDO enabled USB token or smart card. During the registration, the user needs to enter the USB token in the USB port of his laptop, needs to tap in order to validate his presence, and during the actual registration process, a key pair is generated. The private key stays as the device, that's the secure information that is stored securely on the FIDO USB token, while the public key is sent on the relying party. By relying party, you can think of Azure, Office 365, Gmail. Most of these providers do currently support FIDO authentication. So the registration is done, and then the user needs to access a protected resource. So he has the USB token and needs to access Azure portal or Office 365. He inserts the USB token on the laptop, taps in order to validate his or her presence, and then a challenge, some random data is generated from the relying party, from Azure. Then using the private key, this data gets signed and sent back to Azure or Office 365. Azure or Office 365 do have the public key, so they can validate. Once the validation is successful and done, the user quite smoothly and easily can access the protected resource. So this is more or less the common definitions of FIDO and the common processes that you are going to deal with in case you adapt FIDO technologies. The most common FIDO use cases are login to web and cloud applications. More and more cloud and web app providers are supporting FIDO-enabled devices. FIDO can be also used on mobile phones. Our USB tokens and smart cards are also NFC enabled, so they can be easily used also in tablets and mobile phones. And I would say that FIDO authentication works in a similar way than the PKI. So it is based on asymmetric cryptography, but it also has presence detection in order to validate the presence of the user. At THALES, we have evolved our PKI solution by adding FIDO smart cards and USB tokens. So two main types are provided, the USB token and the smart card. So it's totally up to the company to get a pure FIDO-enabled device, or they could also get some hybrid device, so they could combine both PKI and FIDO. So they may get a smart card, store some certificates that are used for email signing or for encryption or for client authentication, while they will also get a FIDO-enabled smart card that will be able to use for Azure, for Gmail, for Office 365, for Windows Logon, and so on. So THALES has been so far a password authentication expert if you take into account safe and trusted access that can provide multi-factor authentication and access management, along, of course, with our PKI and FIDO offerings. So if you combine the products, or if you take a single solution out of the offerings, you can really go passwordless and prevent breaches, enable cloud transformation securely, and simplify compliance. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Kostas. Very, very good presentation. Let me ask you, because I'm very interested in zero trust philosophy in general. So, how do you see the adoption of the zero trust strategies in the future, considering this probably the adoption of the new normal, meaning new way of work, from the distance?
I would say that within the next 2 years, it's going to be the dominant technology. The vast majority of the organizations are going to establish a zero trust protocol, because more and more users are working remotely. Actually, most likely the remote work is going to be established. So I would say that zero trust will be really the dominant technology in both procedural and technical ways. So the companies are going to establish a procedure, some procedures, some processes, but they are also going to implement technical controls with multi-factor authentication, with access management, and so on.
Kostas, thank you very much for being with us with the CIO Council Virtual Summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.